we have so many different types of fears, whether it's heights, or going to the dentist, or even snakes, spiders, claustrophobia, or even lightning and thunder. But one of the biggest threats to our species we don't necessarily think about all the time are little bugs that they kill in millions. These bugs are called viruses. Now, viruses are metabolically inert, and they contain DNA in protein capsules, and they inject this DNA into cells. And whether or not we can consider these viruses to be alive or not is more of a philosophical or even a theological argument. So, scientists define life and non-life in very different ways, but we can look at the evolutionary biology and the origins of life to kind of define viruses are in fact living. So, according to David Bella in his article, all cellular organisms can claim a primordial direct lineage to primordial cells or a cell. Now the question is, are viruses able to claim this same ancestry? So, scientists have long argued the definition of life, and whether or not viruses fit into that definition of life, it doesn't really fit the bill. So, viruses can only produce, and that's one of the only processes that viruses have that can consider to be alive. So, looking at the individual viruses, they don't carry this transitional machinery to reproduce properly. But, according to an article by Brennan Milton, he says that in the last decade there has been more evidence than ever that kind of supports this idea that viruses are in fact alive. He says that there's this evidence of something called a virus. Now, a virus is in fact larger than some types of bacteria, and this reason alone, it suggests that they have a larger genome library. To kind of put this in perspective, the Ebola virus has 7 genes in the virus. Now, this virus has hundreds of genes in just the protein alone of the virus. So this kind of throws the lack of transitional machinery argument for classifying them as non-living kind of on its head. So, going into the evolutionary history of viruses, we look at a study done by the University of Illinois crop scientist and biology professor Gustave Quintano-Anoles, and he took on the task of kind of tracing this viral history. So he says that viruses do evolve, and they are very diverse, and he suggests that there are 1 million different types of species of viruses. Now, looking at the evolutionary biology and history, it's very hard to study because mutations occur so often in the viruses, and they're occurring at such a rapid pace that it's hard to trace back this history. So, to solve this problem, he took on the idea of looking at the protein folds in these viruses. Now, protein folds are puzzle-like structures that kind of obtain this protein, and you're able to kind of look back at the evolutionary history from these folds. Now, he looked at 5,080 organisms, 3,460 were viruses, and 1,620 were cells from other organisms representing every branch in the tree of life. So what they found was pretty drastic. They found that 442 protein folds were shared between viruses and cells, along with 66 folds that were unique to viruses. So this suggests that there's some type of branching going on. Now, it suggests that viruses were not simply shed genetic material. And this we can look at, and this stems from an idea called reductive evolution. And this means that rather than cells becoming more complex, they're becoming more simple. So viruses were more likely cellular in nature and existed in a form of primitive cells. So an undergraduate student named Nashir, she suggested that when a virus is injected, the DNA is injected into a cell, that the new viruses formed are kind of like the primitive cells back long ago in history. Thus, in the beginning, virus plus cells existed as one unit. So today they're kind of split up, but they can restore their association upon viral infection of a cell. So another development that we kind of look at is the bacteria's functional immune system. And there's a virus called bacteriophage in which it is able to conquer the cell and actually steal the immune system of a bacteria called cholera bacteria. And it steals the immune system, and it can kill and multiply these bacterial cells. Now, they prey exclusively on bacteria, and each phage is parasitically mated to each specific type of bacteria. that viruses are in fact living, because scientists can now treat bacterial infections with this kind of virus and able to cure patients who are resistant to antibiotic medicines. So we've kind of seen the background from the natural science. It's kind of apparent that we see all the natural science research and history. But looking at it from an arts perspective is a little bit different. We have an artist, his name was Luke Jerram, and he looked at viruses specifically under a microscope, and he said non-scientists have a hard time distinguishing between the different types of viruses. So what he did was he created an artwork called Glass Microbiology. And in an article written by Claire Tinsley from the Smithsonian.com, she says that his representations are blown up to 1 million times their size from under a microscope. Now, the glass structures, they're very intricate, and they're very, very detailed, and it requires extreme detail for him to create these glass sculptures, and a lot of the viruses that he creates, he's actually not able to create them specific enough because the structure would not hold itself. So he gets the design, him and a virologist work together to get the design of the virus, and they take it to a glass blower, and the glass blower is able to determine whether or not he's able to produce this kind of artwork. And so here we see in comparison how big he's making these glass sculptures, and you can kind of see how detailed they really are. And so these glass sculptures, they really show people what kind of impact these viruses have. Because he said in an interview, when people come up to these sculptures, they aren't really sure what it is. And so he tells them that these are viruses. And they kind of like recoil, they kind of like step back because they think they're going to catch the virus. But he says that if viruses were not living, would this artwork have the same impact it does on people? So from a social science standpoint, according to Earl Winter in an article he writes in Psychology Today, he says that it's quite possible that we actually owe sex and romance to viruses. He says that humans would reproduce asexually if it weren't for viruses. And so a lot of complex species would not be able to survive without viral infections as well. So they adapt themselves to genetic structures of their victims. So sexual reproduction enables two individuals from different genomes to get together and produce an offspring. So the goal of this is evolution. And so the hereditary chain of animals sharing genomic similarity, natural selection would actually favor reproduction within a family unit. So brothers and sisters would be favored as mates to produce offspring. Now a lot of us it kind of freaks us out with that idea that mating with a brother or sister is kind of weird. But science has actually shown that we as humans are sexually attracted to people who we find have the same personality and have kind of a similar appearance. So in cases of adoption or separation of parents, this is not uncommon. So it's reasonable, and it stems from the fact that the viral threat were not present, and evolutionary advantage would be to be marrying our relatives. And it would be a great evolutionary advantage. So the last of these disciplines comes from a humanities perspective. And when looking at the human race, there's an interesting debate that goes on. And there was a debate, according to debate.com, their question was asked, do you believe humans are a virus to the planet Earth? 87% of people said yes, and 13% said no. So the supporting side of this argument suggests that people are a plague, and we're too disorganized and too stubborn to kind of make this world a better place. The opposing side says that viruses are non-living, and therefore we cannot compare humans to non-living creatures. But that's only 13%. So the other 87% must believe that viruses are living. So our definition of life doesn't really fit the qualities of a virus. But new evidence is strong enough that we are able to expand our definition of what it is meant to be alive, and we should be